This is the first session of political ecology. We will start with a presentation by Riccardo Emilio Chesta from Scuola Normale Superiore with the title The Contentious Politics of Expertise, a comparative research on grassroots environmentalism.
So, hello everybody. I don't know, maybe I have to look at the camera. So it's quite difficult to manage both dimensions, the digital and the physical one, but that's the challenge of our contemporary 4.0 world. By the way, thanks a lot for everybody for participating, both online and offline. I'm going to present here basically the results of a previous research that lasted for more or less 7 years, and it was a study between social movement and sociology of expertise. It's a book that you can find, if you wish, published for Routledge, and in the political sociology series, The Contentious Politics of Expertise. It's a comparative research on 4 mobilization processes regarding environmental issues and conflicts at the local level, in Italy particularly. But yeah, it is something that I want to discuss not just as something already finished, but something that can be developed also nowadays with new extensions, particularly in the new changes that had affected the environmental movement. So where did we start? I started basically from some opinions and positions that were debated in the public sphere, in the Italian debate, regarding a new relation between social movements and the experts. For example, Piero Bevilacqua on the pages of Il Manifesto was suggesting that there was indeed in the new environmental conflicts at the local level, new relation between competence, expertise, and democracy, particularly the new local mobilizations that were concerning local citizens committees were showing a huge expert knowledge, use of expert knowledge in terms of also scientific experts belonging to this mobilization, which were telling a lot concerning the new relation between science and activism. So I was trying to basically bridge some contributions from the science and technology studies and the social movement studies. I basically perceived kind of gap between the two literatures that are quite interdisciplinary, but while, for example, the science and technology studies was recognizing already the role of citizens in producing bottom-up expertise, we all know Agir dans un monde incertain of Bart Caldon-Lascum, or also the position that Latour was raising in the politics of nature, in which was saying that the relation between science and green politics needed to be explored more in depth. But at the same time, there was a lack of knowledge in science and technology studies regarding, some realist conditions concerning how basically people mobilize. So the strategies and the resources they use, the kind of activist politics and culture that basically define environmentalism, for example, in all its cultures. And on the other hand, social movement studies were already starting to explore quite recently the role of experts and scientists, but there was little attention on how expertise and activism was coexisting. Mainly the traditional kind of ideational or cultural analysis of political cultures that was investigated by social movement study was more, let's say, ideologies, political ideologies, less, let's say, the culture that were embedded in techniques or scientists. There were some exceptions, like Steve Yearly articles on the green ambivalence about science, in which he was basically suggesting that while science enter into environmental politics, it can become sometimes also contradictory, because some political campaign can be contradicted by scientific evidence. At the same time, they can become very beneficial to social movements, but in an indirect way. So these were new challenges that needed to be explored more in depth. There was a few exceptions, like the huge case study of Steve Epstein on the politics of knowledge of AIDS activism, in which he basically suggests how not only science was used as a tool for protest, but how basically also you have an institutionalization process of movements mobilizing and reaching to be part of the technical commissions, like for example in the case of the gay community and the LGBTQs in the US, fighting of course AIDS treatment, official treatments, and how they became part of the official commission and biomedical commission in which they changed the trials. My case study, going back to the empirics, it's the Italian new environmentalism of the 2000s. New environmentalism is a concept that was raised by Alberto Sorrosa, one of the public intellectuals that joined the assembly of the committees of the Tuscan platform, one of the main cases that I've looked at. And of course, there was a common perception that there was a huge level of conflict and grassroots mobilization against high-tech projects in the early 2000s all around Italy. And we have also, let's say, already some scientific evidences that came from collective projects like the one by Donatella Della Porta on the civic committees all around Italy at the urban level, or the one directed by Luigi Pellizzoni and this edited book by Il Mulino on environmental conflicts and expertise, which was one of the first main general work on this relation between expertise, institution, and conflicts. So what I've counted is basically, from the evidence that I've collected, 166 citizen committees, spontaneous citizen committees, so not citizen committees in terms of running for elections or institutionalized, but spontaneous citizen committees in Tuscany around 2009, and 200 citizen committees in Veneto in 2015. There I've put photos of one of the main, let's say, leader that was able to gather all these committees in a regional platform, the regional Venetian regional platform for the citizens committees, a Catholic leader of the Beati Costruttori di Pace, and I can tell you a lot about the specific political culture behind it. And this is a graph about the participants, the number of participants of the committee and the association. We see that there is for example, a huge role played by Florence, the main city center of Tuscany, and more or less the same centrality is in Veneto, though I don't have synthetic data on that regarding Venice. So the method I can skip because it's more formal issue that I can discuss with you afterwards for technicalities, but you know, the method is more an abductive method, so it's a mixed method, but basically it's more a qualitative one. I've compared 4 mobilization processes, 2 political campaigns on big infrastructure in 2 cities, and conducting 58 semi-structured and in-depth interviews with key actors, activists, and experts, focus groups, and participant observation at public events, demonstrations, and assemblies. So the case selection is basically the relevance of the mobilization, the conflict extension, the time scale, the MOSE, the TAV in Florence, which they developed over decades, the number of protest events, but also the symbolic centrality that this struggle had, you know, in the general diffusion of many struggles, the regional level, the MOSE, the TAV, or the incinerator in Florence, the cruise ships in Venice, were all central key symbolic struggles. At the same time, the variation I found is more or less the type of technology that is at stake. So here, for example, on the TAV in Florence, you have previous antecedent comparable cases like the famous Lyon-Turin that produced also some resources and some evidences that were used by the committee as a sort of antecedent case, you know, where similar dynamics were happening, like risks, like type of enterprises or business groups involved, and so on. And this, of course, affected the way citizens mobilized. And also, at the same time, the property of technology, so the absence or presence of visible human impacts was playing a role in a sense that, for example, the MOSE that I classified as a very opaque infrastructure because there was no previous case of system of raw mobile gates which is such, you know, very abstract effects in the lagoon, so that you can catch all, just if you are an urban planner specialized in the landscape of the lagoon, in waves, in sea levels, and so on. While, for example, the cruise ships are, of course, something extremely visible that you can directly experience when you walk in Venice, or when you live in Venice and you don't have a Wi-Fi connection, because the electromagnetic waves are, of course, basically impacting directly on your house. So this opacity and clarity is a sort of a binary concept that I used to explain also the difference between the extension of mobilization and the, for example, limitation that it had beyond social movement organization with less broader consensus among the citizens. The factors of mobilization, of course, it's the fact that there is a resource asymmetry between business groups and public institutions. So the main expertise of the MOSE is all internal to the Consorzio Venezia Nuova, for example, or like in Pregilo and COP Nodavia on the TAV. They have all engineers that basically produce projects that with the Legge Obiettivo are not at all a definitive project, so they have to be evaluated, for example, by a small commission at the local level, and with no clarity about the end that this project will fulfill, since it is just, you know, a draft. At the same time, this insufficient knowledge produced by the proponents, which is with a very specific expertise linked to business groups, create also the fact that there is a grassroots expertise that mobilize on issues that have not been included in the official expertise, that is environmental risk, things that relate not just with the benefits of this big infrastructure that are, of course, overloaded and over-exaggerated by the proponents, because that's the job they are doing, basically. So proposing projects that seems to be extremely beneficial to local communities. And of course, this grassroots expertise produce kind of alternative knowledge production, like, for example, the zero waste strategies on the waste incinerator in Florence, which takes, of course, part of the program of the Zero Waste International movement that regards, for example, the reduction of some plastics at the beginning of the cycle of production, and so on. Or, for example, the alternative project on the stations, the sustainable station that you need to exclude basically the cruise ships out of the lagoon. So which kind of experts are, 2 minutes left, thanks, Viviana. Which experts are involved? Here I'm doing just an heuristic formal synthesis, but I basically consider that there are mainly engineers and urban planners mobilizing on the side of the committees. And here we see also that I classify them depending on the type of outcomes in the interviews as activists on the side of urban planners, and allies, for example. Here you have more urban planners rather than allies. For example, 6 urban planners are more activists over 8, rather than, for example, engineers are all basically more allies. So they are experts that justify their intervention in the committee as something technical, extremely precise, without being involved in social movement dynamics. So for expert activists, I basically defined people that mobilize for with a membership in social movements organization with an historical activism, where expert allies, for example, mobilize on single issues, so they justify their intervention as something. Then there is the third dimension, which are the lay experts, the bottom-up expertise, which are people that have no academic credential, let's say, but they mobilizing over decades. They basically create a symbolic capital that made them relevant to become, for example, also included in institutional commission to produce alternative forms of waste management. That's the case of Rossano Orcolini, called by the municipality of Rome to deal with the problem of wastes. Or, for example, some railway workers that were extremely aware of the effects of the TAV in Florence because they know very well the railway structure in the city. So why so few engineers? Basically, what I found by the interview is that many engineers were also suggesting that in the profession there is some reluctance to be involved in public action because either they feel genuinely fear, in entering cultural terrain, or at the same time they lack the language of society and politics. I'm running a lot, but while on the other hand, the expert activists, which are mostly urban planners, when they justify their intervention, they take as an example their long-term activism in political groups and associations, so dealing more with cultural engagement linked to political groups and so on. Here we see also from the evidence, qualitative evidence, how basically the engineers, they basically justify also their conflict they have with the effects of their intervention on the public sphere as something, individual, so something that deals with their individual status. So which kind of expertise do you find in these finally movements? It's a mobilization also of expertise that comes quite often also from the external part of the out of the movement, in a sense that, for example, many groups in the No Cruise Ships committee, they defended the project that was more sustainable, produced by a multinational like the Duferco, so they have no problem in supporting alternative projects to the one proposed by the Port Authority if they are more sustainable for the environment of the lagoon. So most of the time, they do not only produce internal expertise, but they also support an external one if they are able to judge it as in line with their own scopes and philosophy. At the same time, you have also alternative research centers that are produced, like the Eco Institute Alex Langer in Mestre or the Zero Waste Center in Capannori that produce most of the time alternative forms of waste management or expertise for specific causes. Or then you have expert organizations like Medicina Democratica, the International Society of Doctors for the Environment, the Territorialisti, that are cultures of activism mobilizing. So in a sense, let's say, in a nutshell, critical expertise also has no problem in using mainstream scientific weapons or resources to mobilize against issues that are neglected by private and institutional politics. So what is a contentious politics of expertise? Finally, expertise is a politics by other means, so it means that it becomes a political conflict at a higher technical complexity. Conflict do not cancel expertise, but rather it extends it, so it multiplies expertise to several issues that are not included by the official one. And then long-term participation to activism can produce bottom-up expert and expert activism, so a kind of conversion of competences from technical one to political one and vice versa. So expertise is also, in my opinion, from this comparative analysis, a sign of both growing pragmatism among the social movements, but also something that can become transversal, can create unstable but new collective identities. So I would say it's a less alternative expertise, less individual, but more a collective aspect of collective action and activism. Thanks a lot for listening to me, and sorry for running out of time.
Thank you very much to Riccardo for this insightful presentation. Sorry, I'll switch again. So now we will have another presentation. You can sit down. Another presentation by Emanuele Leo from the University of Bologna. He is presenting a paper entitled, written together with Maura Benegiamo, Alice Dal Gobbo, and Salvo Torre, which is also here, entitled Pluriverse in Italy, the state of the art of movements for climate justice. So Emanuele, although he had prepared the presentation in Italian, he was so kind to do it in English, to
is gonna give it a try. Let's see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Viviana. Thanks a lot to Alfredo Aglietti and the other members of the Scientific and Logistical Committee for organizing all this. As Viviana said, there was a, oh no, wait a second. There was a miscommunication. So I wasn't aware that colleagues who don't speak Italian were present both physically, thanks, and virtually. So I'm gonna improvise. I hope it makes sense. If it doesn't, please be merciful. It may be a language issue. So what I want to do in this 10-15 minutes is to reflect a little bit on the Italian edition of this important book published in 2019, entitled Pluriverse, a post-development dictionary. The editors of the original publication are Ashish Kotari, Ariel Salé, Arturo Escobar, Federico De Maria, and Alberto Acosta, whereas the editors of the Italian edition are Maura Benegiamo, Alice Dal Gobbo, Emanuele Leo, and Salvo Torre. This is why I'm talking about this now. And the idea is to divide the presentation into two chunks. In the first, I give a few hints about, like, what the book is about. The book is composed by over 100 short essays divided into three main categories. The first one is about the idea of development, and it builds a link with the predecessor of this book, which is the very famous development dictionary edited by Wolfgang Sachs in 1992. And the Italian edition of this important book was published a few years later, edited by Marco Giovagnoli and Pietro Tarozzi. The second section of the book is devoted to what they call reformist solutions, and it takes basically, a tenth of the book. The huge part of the book is devoted instead to alternatives to development. So let me start by comparing and contrasting, if you want, the two books. The line of continuity is that they both deal with the era of development, what Wolfgang Sachs defined as the era of development, which was opened by Henry Truman's speech in 1949. The idea that developed nations would constitute the end point of a properly constructed trail towards either perfection or the pinnacle of civilization, if you want. And what they do in the book in 1992 is to basically frame the critique of development in terms of a governmental device or governmental dispositif, okay? But also as a formamentis, as a conceptual tool. And the unity of this device was basically composed by four elements. It was a chronopolitical element, so the idea of a linear temporality, a geopolitical element in which the global north would constitute, as we said, the end point of a process of improvement, if you want. And then there is a socio-political element, so the GDP would constitute the measure, the unity of measure of this process. And then the political subjective element, which is, who are the actors of development? Nation states, if we want. This is the line of continuity. So there is this idea that development is this thing, and that there has been something like an era of development. The main difference, though, is that if in 1992, with the fall of the USSR and the idea that the only game in town was going to be capitalism, so not only we had a widespread consensus around the idea of development, but this idea would no longer be possible to be thought in two main ways, a socialist way and a so-called free-market way, but rather in only one way, like the process of unification. So when Sachs and his colleagues wrote this book, the idea was the development era is now finally going to be achieved. We are not only in this era, but we are going to achieve the promise of development because the USSR is no longer there. So we have finally the possibility to go through that. Pluriverse was written in 2019, when actually what we have witnessed is the end of this promise of global improvement. There is an important line in the new, because the preface to Pluriverse is written by Wolfgang Sachs. So he himself establishes this connection, and he says what is no longer there is the fact that middle classes all over the world do no longer believe that their condition is going to improve, and even more, that their children's condition is going to improve with regard to their own. And this is basically what marks, according to Sachs, the end of the era of development. His example is the Sustainable Development Goals of the Agenda 2030, where he basically say the idea is no longer that the US or Europe or whoever marks the end point of a process, but rather that everybody in a multipolar way, which is, you know, more vague than problematic actually. So every nation state or every regional entity needs to pursue these goals without having an example to be followed. So it's over the follow the leader narrative. But we may say the same if we look at the Paris Agreement when it comes to climate governance. Okay, so the pillar of Kyoto was the common but differentiated responsibilities. So the idea is someone has to pay more to get to a proper place, and others who have contributed less historically to the problem will follow through, but more slowly. Right now, with the Paris Agreement, actually everybody, the intentional nationally determined contributions mean that every nation state provides to the UN, you know, a goal, and then, you know, they try to reach that goal. Maura Benegiamo prefers to talk about the crisis of development rather than the end, because actually somewhere in the world this idea of improvement persists, even if in a different form. So I'm just saying that where the two books differ in the historical context, it means they basically are inserted in a different problematic field. Okay, so even the debates they raise do not actually fit each other. Like, you know, those are different problems. Well, I already said that the other difference is actually, how can I say, structural. So if the development dictionary wanted to deconstruct development as a governmental device, Pluriverse is more focused in collecting different alternatives to development, alternatives which are already existing. Okay, in the post phase of the Italian edition, Luigi Pellizzoni insists on this issue by saying that if what comes after development is not to be considered, you know, a utopia to be produced in the future, but rather is an already existing heterotopia, and of course the reference is to the Foucauldian concept. I don't have much time left, so again, like, you know, some of the issues I'm just translating for people who don't speak Italian. So Pluriverse recognizes much more than it was the case before that there is a centrality of political ontology. So what we define collectively as reality actually embodies the main political stakes of our current time. It's no longer something that can be given, even if maybe in different forms. There is the huge problem of, does Pluriverse needs to be translated into cultural relativism, and everything is okay? Of course, this is not the case according to the editors. I'm talking about the editors of the original book, because we, as the editors of the Italian edition, we were not part of this debate, but they provide a list of values. So this is the expression they use, that must be respected in order for pluriverse to actually occur, amongst others, autonomy, solidarity, equity, and of course they raise the problem of how do you account for something which is not universal, which does not aspire to be universal, but needs to follow a list of values. This is a political problem that is, one of the problems that the book gives to social movements, or in general the academic community. And the last point is the crucial role of feminisms in the plural. Like, one of the issues we like the most in the book is that actually it's not only a critique of liberal feminism, but it's actually an inventory, a collection of different ways of conceiving feminism from all over the world. 2-3 minutes, Viviana, and then I'll stop about our work. What did we do as the Italian editors of this book? I use the French expression par, like the word par, which in English would be at the same time by and for. Okay, because as editors, we first relied on militant translations. The book is huge, so it's over 500 pages. It would have been impossible for people, for us, especially because it was a militant act, so we didn't get any money out of that. So we basically asked around social movements we have connections with, or engaged academics in Italy, and not only in Italy. The main point was that they were able to translate into Italian, and we gathered more than 50 people to do this. The operation was extremely time-consuming, and I don't know if I would do that again. But in the end, we are okay. We are happy with the end result, and as a model, it is being exported. So in France, they are doing the same. In Romania, they are doing the same. In Hungary, they are doing the same. So probably even the editors of the original book enjoyed the idea. But again, the idea was that this militant translation was to be performed by climate justice movements, okay, for climate justice movements, or movements that actually see themselves as belonging to the broader field of political ecology. And we thought about that in two terms. First, as a tool for self-education. Okay, movements that have erupted in 2019 have shown a considerable social force, but also have expressed, at least in our opinion, a demand of a new kind of education on these issues, which we thought this book could interact with. Of course, it's not exhaustive, but many other sources have to be put in this effort, but it may be a good starting point, or in any case, a good source. And we are having good feedbacks about this. The second element was to use this book as a tool to reflect on the issue of organization, how to organize for climate justice. Because one of the things we saw in 2019 was a huge drive towards mobilization. So huge numbers in the squares. The four global climate strikes were, in two cases especially, extremely successful. Let's see what happens tomorrow, because tomorrow is finally the 5th global climate strike, which was originally scheduled for 24th of April 2020. For obvious reasons, that was not possible, but let's see what happens tomorrow. In any case, these huge numbers in the squares did not translate into an availability to structure this movement. So, the assemblies, the meetings were not, there were people, of course, but in no way numbers which are comparable. Let's say the promise of those numbers in the square did not translate into a sufficient number of organizers. Some people were there, as I said, but not as much as we could hope. And so probably, since the issue of organization is tangentially, diagonally cutting all the essays in the book, we believe it could be a good starting point. Other sources are coming out in these days. For example, Rodrigo Nunes has just published a book titled Neither Vertical Nor Horizontal on the issue of organization. And the idea is to use ecology as a prism through which reconsidering the issue of political organization. For a nice review, in my opinion, Davide Gallo Lassere published in Italian for Ephemera, in English for Viewpoint, a nice review of this text. There is also, and I conclude here, some of the essays directly deal with the idea of how to reconstruct or construct from scratch, depending on where you cite yourself in the analysis, the link between the union movement and the climate justice movement. Some of you may have read the letter that the Fridays for Future in Italy sent to the unions, not just the official unions, but also and especially rank and file. And I think that is an element that may be expanded in the future and may be important to solve, to address the organizational issue. And I stop here just saying that next week in Milan, there will be the pre-conference of the party. The conference of the party number 26 will be in Glasgow, but the pre-COP is in Italy. And there are mobilizations organized. Let's see how it goes. Fingers crossed. Thank you for your attention. And
Perfect. And okay. So now we will proceed with actually with presentation from people that are far, that are not here physically present. The first one is Andrea Casals with a presentation on a Latin American reading of the Hunger Games.
So thank you very much, everybody, for this conference and for allowing me in here. Thank you to the Ferrara University. It is 5:30 a.m. here, so I'm a little bit slow at this time of the morning, so please bear with me. In this presentation, I will explore the possible implications of rereading The Hunger Games, an iconic dystopian young adult novel from 2008, through the lens of an unexpected readership, somewhat returning the gaze to read a fiction icon pop text from, quote, the North, using critique from, quote, the South. Next. There. So this this presentation is part of my current research called How Radical Can Hope Be? Generative Rereadings of Dystopian Narratives. My previous research was on children's literature and picture books, and I found that there was a gap between the pastoral nature-loving text for young readers to this YA dystopian narratives built on for the climate generation that have been read by those who are now the activists in, for example, Fridays for Futures, those young people born around the turn of the century, the millennia, and who have grown in school probably learning about climate change, how to recycle, etc., but also bearing a whole lot of climate anxiety. So what I am trying to do here is how can we, considering that probably editors, Hollywood, etc., will not change their love for dystopia and catastrophe, that maybe we can learn to reread these narratives with a generative eye. And I think that is a subversive move. I would like to say that when I first saw the film, which I saw the film The Hunger Games 1 before reading it, because I went with my 12-year-old and 14-year-old kids to watch it, I was puzzled that censorship and public discussion went around teens fighting other teens to death, and no one was scandalized with this very normalized society where there were some citizens of, quote, first class, and then other citizens that were less than second class. And at a more personal level also, my own children, who are also climate generation youngsters now, claimed after reading The Hunger Games that they would not have children of their own because the world in which those children would grow would be so devastated. And actually, that is an idea that puzzles me and that devastated me in turn. The Hunger Games was written by Susan Collins. The saga explores the effects of, this is what she intended, the saga explores the effects of war in young people. She was watching the Iraq War being televised, and she thought this was very much like a reality show, and that the public, the audience, was somehow being numb in front of what they were watching because it seemed more like a movie than the actual, quote, news broadcast. Susan Collins is the daughter of a former US military, and she learned all these survival skills that you see in this father-daughter relationship in the Hunger Games. She learned it from him, and this is, I would say, the saga is very, very well informed. But what I want to do is, I would like to subvert this image here. The Hunger Games assumes a distant reconfiguration of the United States in a distant future after a civil war caused by climate crisis and the scarce resources that were left. The map here that I'm showing, this is not an official map. This is a map made by funds. The map suggests the flooded areas because of the rising sea level and the reorganization of the territory into districts. The story is inspired by previous young adult text and cultures such as the 1999 Battle Royal, and even somehow recalls the Lord of the Flies. If we look at the map here on the right on your screen, this gray colored area is District 12, where our protagonist comes from. And then in between this big red area towards the left, towards the west, we have the capital. The capital is the capital of this new country called Panem, recalling, of course, the Latin expression bread and circus to the people. And certainly this setting, Collins' idea or reconfiguration of the United States, makes us wonder. We were just hearing about questioning the idea of development, and Latin American intellectuals like Eduardo Galeano have said that development is, some countries develop at the expense of many others. In this case, in this map, it is the capital here towards the west. Remember also that in the North American, in the US tradition, there is this myth of the conquering the frontier that is always towards the west. But the capital develops and is sophisticated at the expense of all the other districts. But what I would like to propose here then is a reconfiguration of the map, and to think of the Hunger Games as an allegory, not of the reconfiguration of the United States in a distant future, but as the map of the world today. This map that we have on the screen is a map that was proposed in the 1980s, and this black line somehow divides the world into the, quote, global north and the global south. There seems to be some kind of cardinal positions problem with whoever did this map, because we see here Australia is absolutely in the south as well. But anyway, Australia is up there in the part considered as part of the, quote, also Western world, or the global north. So what I want to say here, what I want to propose is, I would like to add also that I am not completely comfortable with the idea of the global north and the global south. I think this puts, I am critical because I think it sounds somewhat certainly sounds better than development, underdevelopment, or first world, third world, but I believe it is still problematic in terms of blurring the diversity and complexity each of these bioregions and cultural territories involved in the south and in the north, not to mention, well, Australia, as I said. So in this case, what I am proposing is the whole world is panem, and then, quote, the global north would be the capital, and then the global south would be the districts. The novel, I am not going to tell you the whole story because I am assuming that everyone has at least an idea of what the novel is about, but certainly the saga is packed with references to the Roman Empire, the, quote, cradle of modern civilization, some may say. In the prequel of the saga published just last year, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, these references are even stronger, and the idea that the first actual games took place in the ruins of what seems to be the Colosseum is clear. The main road in Panem, for example, is Avenida Il Corso, and in his coming-of-age novel narrative, young President Snow, Corius Snow, is an evident reference to Gaius Marcius Coriolanus, sorry for my pronunciation here, believed to be a Roman general who is said to have lived in the 5th century before Christ. He besieged Rome, and in that, he is known to have prohibited the distribution of wheat among the starved people. So here we have a clear reference to the central plot of the novel. But then again, the book also presents contradictions, and we might as well consider that the cradle of the contemporary capital-driven society could be the British Industrial Revolution. Some would agree that we could even place the start of the Anthropocene, or, quote, the Capitalocene, right there. However, then, the main figures in the saga are Katniss Everdeen, making reference to an edible plant, which you see on the botanical figure on the left, an edible plant from the Americas, also known as the arrowhead or the Sagittaria, making clear reference to the protagonist's knowledge of native plants, her capacity to exert food sovereignty by foraging and hunting, and her mastery of the bow and arrow, which construct her as a subversive character even before entering the games. In the ballad, Corio's lover, but also antagonist, and sorry here for the spoiler alert, is called Lucy Gray. Again, Collins betrays her tightly packed reference to the Roman Empire. But who is Lucy Gray? Lucy Gray is a poem by William Wordsworth, who is an icon of romantic poetry. And for those of you who don't know, romantic poetries were crying for the loss of the connection to nature and calling out at the dangers of the Industrial Revolution. As in the poem, when Lucy Gray in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is lost, Corio has, in this moment, crucial moment, he has the chance to take a different path. But he chooses self-interest and the ambition to make his family, quote, great again. He chooses the patriarchal, chauvinist, hierarchical society and hegemonic power of the capital, quote, in my analogy, the global north. He chooses to live for the frivolous and consumerist needs of the capital based on an extractivist and exploitative society that is blind to the needs of those who are in the districts, in my analogy here, the global south. In the sagas, Katniss' bold and radical act of volunteering for her sister's prim is rooted in her ethics of care, but also her understanding that she has better odds to survive the games than her sister. This encourages the oppressed district dwellers to salute her silently with the three-finger salute, which she understands as a gesture of respect and resistance. As an empowering popular culture icon, the climate generation, the three-finger salute has been adopted, for example, by the Myanmar protesters after the coup in Thailand in 2014. That is the image that you see on the right of the screen. And has since come to stand for solidarity and resistance across the region, according to The Guardian. Catani's capacity to establish collaborative relations, to care for others, exert food sovereignty, and take from nature what is needed and not more than that. Her capacity to understand the signs of nature, even in the artificial arena of the games, give her the chance to survive. And her care ethic sets an example that further encourages acts of resistance in other districts, for example, District 11, where Rue comes from. So, to end, here we have on the screen, you see the cover of a book by Eduardo Galeano called The Bleeding Veins of Latin America, where he explains how we, after the independence, and this is not only Eduardo Galeano, but many other Latin American intellectuals, even after the independence of the colonies in Latin America, we go on living in a colonial mindset relation because of the extractivism that is exerted in South America and Central America. On the right of the screen, we have you can see Paulo Freire. So following Galeano, Boff, and many other intellectuals, even Pope Francis now, where our colonial past merges with the neo-colonial extractivist present and its eco-social injustice footprint, we may understand Latin America as the districts and Panem as the the capital as a consumerist society, corporate and extractivist economies, relentless, unquestioned, growth-driven societies in this global South, global North power relations. Yet, if considering Paulo Freire's radical hope and pedagogy of hope that values the community's know-how and empowers them to work together when rereading The Hunger Games, when reading it regeneratively, not as a cautionary tale of a distant future, but as the present system and power relations, I believe there is hope to challenge the current state of affairs on our planet, our home, Gaia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this
yes.
Inspiring presentation on the Hunger Games, and thank you very much also for the perfect timing. So for being very perfect, actually, 50 minutes. So we will proceed with the fifth paper, and then we go back to the fourth. So we have a presentation by Onofrio Romano from the University of Bari with the title La forma del limite e il limite della forma.
The genesis of this communication is the reading of an important, a precious essay by Luigi Pellizzoni titled Nature Limits and Form of Life on Environmental Politics this year. And it follows a series of studies on limits, mainly in the degrowth movement, a book on limits by Serge Latouche, and then another book by Giorgos Kallis on the same argument. And the essay by Pellizzoni has been for me a little bit disturbing. It was like to be on a roller coaster, because I feel a great consonance. I agree with his fundamental spirit in the critiques, in the critique to the mainstream way in which we oppose to the limits, mainly in the degrowth movement. And I refer to voluntary simplicity and other alternatives that always start with the choose by by the militants, by the opponents, of another way of life. And I am, like Pellizzoni, I'm very worried by this mainstream style of opposing to the present regime of growth, to the growth regime. But at a certain point, I became one of the accused by Pellizzoni, because in my book, Towards a Society of Degrowth, I refer mainly to Bataille, and Pellizzoni interprets this move interprets this choice by me like a form of conventionalization of the limit. So first of all, I think it is better to resume in some way the point of Pellizzoni. Pellizzoni underlines the fact that the limit has a certain hardness. It is material, it is physical, it is natural, and it is also external to our society, and it has a sort of objectivity. This hard character of the limit tends to be structurally eluded by modernity. In some points of the history of modernity, there are some authors that underline the hardness of the limit, like the physiocratics and also Malthus. But and then we can think also to the Club of Rome in their book Limits to Growth in the 70s of the last century. But this materiality of the limit contrasts hardly with the regime of unlimited accessibility that pervades our regime of growth, our growth regime, and that derives from from Hobbes. No? Happiness is a never-ending rush for new and always new objectives and aims. And so modernity is the continuous overcoming of the limit. It is its essence, we can say. In face of the reclaiming of the materiality of the limit, there are always some strategies of illusion, and I think to classical economists, for example, that replace the concept of limit with the concept of scarcity. That became a sort of abstraction, a conceptual abstractions that is finally aimed at the maximization of utility, of productivity for each unity of resources. And also for Marx, the limits are, at the end of the day, a variable that depends on the structure, on the socio-technical structure of society. So the limits are always internalized, become a sort of convention and not an objective standpoint. In general, we are both liberal economists and Marxists are or tend to think that we can overcome all the limits if we renounce to the equilibrium, to a sort of mortal balance, and we let the forces of society unchained in the research of the disorder, of the chaos. And so this unchainment will always lead to something good, and limits will be overcome, that will be certainly put apart. We see something like this also in a sort of providentialism of Marxism. The diminishment of resources is always compensated by the intensification of the extraction of value. And so there is a sort of techno-magical that allows society to free itself from nature, from the limits of nature. So we see the development of expressions like sustainable development, ecological transition, ecological modernization, eco-efficiency, Green New Deal, and so on. So the game is always the same. We try to integrate the matter inside the information, inside the imaginary, the imagination. And so nature is embedded in society, and the limits disappear, magically disappear. I totally agree with this argument, but as I said before, Luigi Pellizzoni in some way attributes to the new generation of degrowthers the same mechanism of transformation of the limit from a natural limit to a conventional limit. And the argument, for example, by Casals that recalls some of my reflection about Bataille, tries to switch from the problem of scarcity to the problem of abundance. So Georges Bataille has pointed out that the fundamental problem of human societies is abundance and not scarcity. And this argument has been taken by Giorgos Callis and also the other editors of the Degrowth Dictionary. In some way, it becomes a new flag of degrowthers. But I think that here there is a sort of misinterpretation of the discourse by Georges Bataille. A misinterpretation because what Bataille tries to do is to recall us that we have to conquer in some way the necessary highness for seeing the entire of society. I tried to quote Bataille in a passage that for me is very important. Bataille says the particular existence risks always to lack resources and to succumb. Opposed to the particular existence, there is the general existence whose resources are in excess and for what dead has no sense. Starting from the particular point of view, the problems are posed firstly by the insufficiency of resources. But if we start from the general point of view, they are posed in the first instance by their excess. What Bataille is saying here is saying that if we frame a regime, a social regime that is based on individualization, on particularization, we will see that the individual will feel a sort of emergency for life, and it will be always engaged in a rush for achieving resources more and more. I think this is the basic mechanism that explains the growth society. But if we reconsider and if we reframe society starting from the general existence, that is from collectivity, then we will see the abundance of resources, and paradoxically, we will see also the limit. We have to well interpret the suggestion by Bataille. When he speaks about abundance, he refers to the fact that it is a biological fact that the energy by the sun can't be catched by the living systems on our Earth, and a lot the share most consistent of energy goes to die. But it doesn't refer to the fact that the present capitalist society doesn't arrive to absorb sufficiently energy. It refers to a process in biology. What is
Onofrio, we can't hear you anymore. He's back. You're back now.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Bataille invites us to reconquer in some way the I-ness necessary to see the general existence, and in this way also to see the limit. So I don't agree with the solution gave by Pellizzoni. He says that the solution is there is no much more time, so I have to trivialize in some way the discourse of Pellizzoni. The solution is the concept of form of life by Giorgio Agamben, the Italian philosopher, that is the search for a life so tied to its form to be not separable from it. The ideal type of this form of life is the monk life, the monastic rule, where the auto-regulation, the self-regulation of the individual is contained in a sort of form that is not overcome, cannot be overcome. So the life in some way melts with the real. I think that this solution is not practicable, is not viable, because it reclaims the coming back of the community. I think it is something very difficult to imagine in our conditions. And in fact, the examples that Pellizzoni recalls and that in his idea go in the way of a form of life are nothing else than experiences of voluntary simplicity. That is the main point of criticism from which he is departed at the beginning. So I think that it is not a solution. We have to recover a form of politics that, first of all, is a large form and that sees inside a political effort to reframe society on the collective point of view. I think that the solution provided by Luigi Pellizzoni is something that recalls the continuing return on the fold, that is the research of micro alternatives to the current growth regime. I think that we have to aim to a political project more large that has to be fight with the traditional guns, as we can say, of hegemony. And the struggle for hegemony is not, we cannot elude the struggle for hegemony. And I think that is the only way to provide a real alternative to the growth regime and to acknowledge the existence of a natural limit. That's all.
Thank you very much, Onofrio, for this inspiring and challenging presentation. And fortunately, Pellizzoni is here, so with us physically. So I think it will be a very interesting discussion as well. So Onofrio was referring to the paper by Pellizzoni, maybe the latest one that has been published, I'm not sure, but anyway, this year.
Nature, Limits and Form of Life.
Nature, Limits and Form of Life, published in Environmental Politics. Okay, so now we will have the next presentation. Sorry that every time I'm switching the video so as not to distract you from the main presentation, so I switch it off and then on again. Otherwise, the video keeps basically oscillating between me and the presenter. So the next presentation is from, I have it here, one second, by Mohammed Mouyaddin, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, from the University of Ferrara. Rohingya influx and host community leading socioeconomic and environmental changes in Bangladesh. So very interesting paper. Thank you very much, Mohammed. So I will leave you.
Thank you very much. I just welcome to my lecture. That is basically Rohingya influx and host community. You know that there is a wonderful crisis for Bangladesh, and it is the leading country for regarding hosting the communities all over the world. So, and at the same time, it is my PhD title too, and I am working on this, but it is very primary stage right now. So I am inviting all of you, and thank you very much. At the same time, you see the great image from the sky, and this is the only small part of the Rohingya camp, you know, and there is around 36 camps where more than 1 million people are living now. So this, by watching this image, you can, I think, have some idea about the situation. So in this lecture, I'll have three purposes. Number one, I'd like to focus on social issues, at the same time economic issues and environment issues. These three issues are very important after influx of Rohingya people for host and at the same time for Rohingyas. So first of all, I'd like to describe my methodology, which one. Basically, it was conducted in qualitative approach, where I use a descriptive approach for analyzing the Rohingya parts, at the same time explorative method for describing host issues, because I find very little literature on host peoples. And at the same time, I followed some of the methods from the qualitative part, which is basically case study, focus group discussions, and key informed interviews. These are, I'll describe in my sampling that I followed purposive sampling, and among the 50 cases, I conducted 30 cases for host communities, and at the same time, 20 cases for Rohingya people. When I conducted key informed interviews, 3 KII I have drawn from the RRC, I mean Refugee Relief and Rehabilitation Commission. At the same time, 3 KII for CIC, I mean Camp in Charge. At the same time, 2 KII for security forces, I mean police and others. At the same time, I conducted 2 more KII for the non-government organizations who are working inside the camp from the national and international NGOs. At the same time, I also conducted 2 FGDs among the host people who are working inside the camp as a job holder, who was basically youngsters, because I would like to attention to the differences between the observation of the general host people, at the same time youngster host people. So my target group are very varied, basically host people, at the same time Rohingya peoples, and at the same time RRC officers, CIC officers, NGO workers, and host job holders. So it will be, I think, little bit multi-triangle observation in my study. And I conducted my study especially in Rohingya camp, where also living the host people. So there is a very next door neighbor between Rohingya and host people, because I wanted to observe the situation, that how Rohingya people are feeling at this moment, or how host people are thinking after coming the Rohingyas. So my specific location was Palongkhali. Palongkhali is the union, and there are also 2 wards, I mean, which is larger than village. This is West Balokali and East Balokali. These 2 area, especially inside the camp. Okay, so camp and 2 host villages are very close. And in these 2 villages, there are 10,000 people, and I conducted in 2 camps where there are around 25,000 people. So 3 camps, sorry. Then, so the time when I collected data is around June this year. So I would like to focus on Bangladesh. You see the images, and through the image, you would like to understand about the situation of Bangladesh. Bangladesh is like that, because within the 147,570 square kilometers, around 165 kilometers people are living, where around 1,115 people live in per square kilometer. That means Bangladesh is already overpopulated. And in this situation, hosting more than 1 million people in this type of area, you easily understand that how Bangladesh is feeling or maintaining now. And per capita income of Bangladesh is very lower. You know, it's around $2,064. And but Bangladesh is growing very smoothly because you see that in 2019 Bangladesh GDP was around 8.2, which is very wonderful in South Asia. But due to COVID situation, Bangladesh got deducted of their GDPs only in 2020 is around 5.7. So also due to COVID situation, the poverty rate also increased in Bangladesh, because previously it was 25%, now it is 35%. So the situation is going to be worse in Bangladesh due to COVID, but we are trying to overcome it. So now I'd like to focus the history a little bit on Rohingyas. You see that Rohingya was coming to Bangladesh from 70s and 90s and 92, but it was not so large, so it was not matter of tension for a country. But in 2017 and 18, around 671,500 Rohingyas influx to our country. So it's now around 1 million. So when it becomes 1 million, this is tension of Bangladesh. And interestingly, when Rohingya people were suddenly coming to our Bangladesh within 1 week, around 600,000 people. So it was, Bangladesh was astonished to decision that whether they will accept them or reject. But you know that our Prime Minister or Bangladeshi people are very hospitable for the newcomers or new peoples, and very humanitarian at the sense. Bangladesh decided to accept these people. So when they came in Bangladesh first, then there was nothing because Bangladesh's resources are very limited. So from the mass people all over the country came to help the Rohingya people with clothes, with foods, with some other things, and at the same time, the host people. This is very small area, so they also give everything to help the Rohingya people, because if you physically see the situation of Rohingya influx, you cannot control yourself or your emotion. So in that situation, I think Bangladesh took the good decisions. But situation is that these are the hands of the Rohingya people. They are waiting for food and other support, and it is primarily taken when they shifted to Bangladesh in 2017 first time. So by supporting the Rohingya people, Bangladeshi people are really, especially the host people in Ukia, Upazila, they suffered a lot. And at the same time, some other socioeconomic conditions which created one kind of discomfort between the relationship of Rohingya and host people. And mainly the problem or the effects that is this area are mainly suffering is the environmental, because of air pollution, sound pollution, water crisis and water pollution, etc. So first of all, I want to describe my economic perspective. There is local market instability, and it is very common that is a remote area where Rohingya people are camped there. It is very remote area, and there is very limited resources. Just there is the people of this area mainly produce the rice and green vegetables or their local fishes, etc., etc. So when there is suddenly 1 million of people, there is a huge demand of the basic needs in the camp, and at the same time in the local area, because you can say that there is supporting from international agencies. Definitely they are supporting the raw materials, I mean rice or all these things, but green vegetables or fish is not supported from the international agencies. So it's a huge pressure on the local market from 1 million people and 500,000 of host people. I mean 1.5 million people in this small area is very difficult. But it is a matter that the local traders thought that Rohingya people will buy different materials from them. But unfortunately or fortunately, after 1 year or 6 months, Rohingya people started to establish markets, which is called Rohingya market. and they are selling the different products to inside the camp among the Rohingya people, which is given by UNHCR and other agencies. They are selling because the agencies given more, which is sufficient for them. So they are selling to the others these extra products, and at the same time it is going to the cities too. So whenever we see the two situations, is that you cannot differentiate who is a Rohingya or who is a local people, because in appearance and the situations or socioeconomic backgrounds, both are same except the language. Language is also same, but accent is little bit different. So there is a huge mixture we see in the camp area. So stability in the sense that the prices of the products raised more than 3 to 4 folds. At the same time, the local laborers lost their job because Rohingya people working inside the camp and near around the camp with a cheap price. Local people sell their labor around $5 to $6 in a day, but Rohingya people selling their labor in $3 to $4. So the owners of the land or the traders are recruiting the Rohingyas, not the locals, because they need the benefit, right? That's why local laborers lost their job and their salaries or wages dropped around 50% according to the different data. So this is the Rohingya market, where Rohingya people are selling their products, and also Rohingyas are buying. Also, host people also can also buy. So this is their self market, and is a very common scenario of Bangladeshi people. It is our local market. People go there and buy different materials at the same time sell. Okay, so in this situation, some Rohingya people try to escape from the camp, though it is seriously illegal and restricted by the security forces of Bangladesh, but they are escaping sometimes, and when they escape from the camp, they are not listed. That means because it is very difficult to identify who is Rohingya and who is Bengali host people, because appearance and language more or less same. Due to supply and demand crisis at the same time, for the cause of dropping wages of the host people, there is an increase of poverty among the host people, which is higher than the Bangladeshi national poverty line. Bangladeshi national poverty line is 24%, but local host area in the camp poverty line is 35%. So it is my self image when I visited to this is the first image is Cox's Bazar beach area, which is the longest beach of the world. At the same time, the right one is the Saint Martin Island, only a Bangladeshi island. So these two places are very popular for tourists in our country. And when I visited for the field work, I saw that there are lots of mobile vendors from the Rohingya people selling different kinds of materials, at the same time green coconuts. And I understand because I am from this city, and I easily realize who is Rohingya and who is local. So I saw many people, many youngsters from the Rohingya people working there. So another problem that is very crucial for host people is losing their lands. And I immediately mentioned that host people, local people mainly depend on agriculture. So for building 36 camps and for building RRRC offices, at the same time building CIC offices and building office for the NGOs, all are covered from local people's land and reserve forest of the country. So in this situation, there is a okay. So I'm switching to other elements. There is another crisis that is going to be is the problem of stealing and robbery. But I don't know, it's very unclear from the people. It is blaming one another when I was visiting there. host people saying that Rohingya people is stealing our materials. At the same time, Rohingya people says that no, you have no permission to go outside of their houses. But when I asked to police and triple RC officers, they says that there are some cases by Rohingya youngsters taking something away from the host people. So this is one of the main cause, and robbery is very dangerous because there are, but most dangerous event that is going on is the criminal activity and social unrest. Because few days, you see, when I was talking about in his police inspector, he says that Rohingya criminal and activists are very active inside the camp after the office. You know, the office time in our country is 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., this is the kingdom of Rohingya extremists and criminals. So in this situation, locals and Rohingya Mas people are very helpless because they have no other way. At least 5 to 6 Rohingya extremist groups from national Bangladesh and Myanmar are living inside the camp. More dangerous group is ARSA, I mean Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, and at the same another is Pakistani Taliban. So tension increased among the Rohingya people and host people, at the same time to security forces who are maintaining law and order in the country. You see the images, this is called Hakim Bahini, who are operating their operations inside the camp, and even they are killing their fellows for their interest. And there are lots of reports. Another issue that I want to draw very shortly is the emotional relations between Rohingya and host people. Is not that actually the local people are very eager to marry the local people. It's basically for traffic, you know, because when they got married, they can collect the birth certificate and passport from the from Bangladesh authority, then they can they traffic the women. You see, there are lots of cases I heard from the host and local and security forces that is going to the marriage between Rohingya and local for trafficking to our capital city, Dhaka and Chittagong. At the same time, some are exporting to international area. Okay, so another problem is, okay, I'm going to finish. This is the life and situation. There's most crisis for environment because normal movement is very difficult. There are going to be tension among the deforestation and dust. At the same time, there is a crisis for water, groundwater. At the same time, surface water. From the environment Department of Environment, it says that 70% of the groundwater are polluted. And at the same time, you see the situation that people are waiting for the water. And there is the system of waste management. At the same time, the dangerous happen that will occur every monsoon is the landslide, because they are living inside the what I say hill. So sometimes it's, and every year in within 2 years, around 20 people Rohingya died by the landslide. So there are many things to say, but I very have to short. But I want to finish here is that actually how we can solve this problem. Okay, I said that there is something which can't be solved, like changing among the norms, values, customs among the people. It can't be mitigated. But you have two solutions. One is temporary, another is permanent. Permanent solution is that Rohingya people want to go back their country, so you have to initiate that one so that they can go their home and save and live safely. Another one is that our government is planning to ship some people, because there is a huge density, to an island of our country named Bashanchar temporarily. So thank you very much for your patience, and thank you very much.
So we have our final presentation by Christian Alarcon and Alessandra Corrado, which should be online, I guess. So yes. On the topic, okay, hello Christian.
Buongiorno, ciao, ciao a tutti.
Great to be all here. And so the topic is ending the neoliberal state in Chile, the role of extractivist development, water grabbing, and other ecological conflicts in the struggles for a new constitution.
Good. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Christian Alarcon, and I will present a work we have together with Alessandra. And now we have the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, it's working.
All right, good.
All right.
As I say, I am Christian, and I am originally from Chile, right now based on Uppsala, working at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. Our presentation is based on the struggles for a new constitution in Chile. And we put the question here about how we can think and follow these struggles in order to understand ideas about ending the neoliberal state in Chile. And to do this, we think we need to think the role of extractivist development, water grabbing, and agroecological conflicts in the struggle for a new constitution. And I will explain why we think this way. We present our work here by giving some ideas about the methodology we're using, the background, some insight from a theoretical framework we are working with, and also to finish, we will give some views on how this constitutional convention is working today and how issues concerning extractivism are discussed by the representatives that were elected to write the new constitution in Chile. So background. In October 2019, thousands of Chileans went to the street to demonstrate after a wave of student mobilizations that were focused on the rising of the transport fee in Santiago, captured the attention of many Chileans that also saw this as a struggle that concerned their own interest. A number of political decisions created the conditions for this massive wave of demonstrations in the country. At one point, in a rally in Santiago, 1 million people got together to demonstrate, and for weeks, Santiago and the rest of Chile were places of big demonstrations against first the government, the right-wing Piñera's government, but also these demonstrations addressed and were motivated by more structural problems connected to Chilean economic development. So this political mobilization in October 2019 needs to be understood in a context of political mobilization in Chile post the beginning of the new democratic system, or the so-called transition to democracy after the dictatorship. Many struggles have been developed in the country, a struggle for the pension system, education, labor rights, environment. But a new kind of activism against Piñera's right-wing government manifested in the demonstrations in October, and this has to do with issues of inequality, of legitimacy of the legal order in the country, also the constitutional rule, because Chile until today has a dictatorship era constitution, and that is one of the main issues today in the political context in Chile, and that issues today being discussed through the work of a constitutional convention in the country. But also it's important to consider the new social environmental conflict, and especially land and water struggles. So this increasing social ecological conflictivity in Chile has been reported in several studies. The Chilean National Human Rights Institute, for example, has a map of environmental conflict, and we can see there more than 100 conflicts all over the country. Also, international initiatives like the Global Atlas of Environmental Justice has reported many conflicts for Chile. And a recent study published in 2020 reported a total of 283 projects that were identified with different conflicts concerning biodiversity and human well-being due to pollution and habitat destruction. This is just to give you an idea of why we really need to consider this social ecological conflictivity when we discuss the possibility of ending the neoliberal state in Chile. So here are some pictures that show some of the economic sectors that are very much linked to the way we understand the neoliberal state in Chile today. One picture from a heavily forested area where plantations of pine and eucalyptus are increasing, and at the same time this creates troubles for local livelihoods, water issues, and a lot of social conflictivity too. Some other pictures from areas with intensive avocado plantations, and also in the south of the country, struggles for justice concerning the right of Mapuche people. And many Mapuche people have been killed, assassinated by police forces when they have been demonstrating and they have been reclaiming back their lands. Here are more details. This is one of the examples of what people in Chile would refer as the extractivist model. And these are water dams that accumulate water for irrigation that is used for the avocado plantations in the northern part of the country. Of course, this is connected to a scarcity of water for human consumption in other parts of the same area. And this is a very, very contested issue, and this is the whole conflictivity associated to the avocado plantations that are mainly were planted for export in this area. We did interviews here, and I just want to refer to one of our interviews, who is an agroecology and water justice activist in this rural area, who told us, but what matters to us is that the communities in the territories should control and manage their own water. This considering water management at the watershed level, and that the people who inhabit the watersheds are the ones in charge of water management and are sovereign to do so. And that they are able to choose what to do with the water and how to distribute the water based on their own needs. And I think that this view on how communities should be empowered to control water access is a key issue today in the struggles against the extractivist model of development in the country. Having said that, I give the word to Alessandra, who will continue explaining some issues concerning the theoretical discussions around extractivist development in Latin America.
Yes, thank you, Christian. We placed our analysis, our study in the framework of the debate concerning extractivist development. Actually, it is a rich debate, especially in Latin America, since the 2000-2010. And also this issue has been developed also within critical and agrarian studies and political ecology studies. One of the main reference is Eduardo Godinas that understood extractivism as a specific type of extraction of natural resources characterized by its high volume and intensity, punctualizing that it happens where half or more of the matter extracted is exported to global markets in the form of raw materials. Again, according to Godinas, neo-extractivism is a dependent development strategy and an unsustainable development style. Extractivism is a mode of resource appropriation. Its structure responds to the first links of the global value chains That is to say, the mode of appropriation is connected and articulated to the capitalist mode of production. The constitutive essence of extractivism is to be sought in the frontier of the advancement of the environment commodification, that is, commodification of nature. So extractivism, according to Godina, is a category for historical analysis in Latin America that allows us to distinguish 4 generational phases, and current extractivism is the fruit of an historical continuum marked by an increase in volume, variety, and intensity of the resources appropriated. The debate, especially in Latin America, the debate around extractivism has been developed also in a critics to the new role of the progressive developmentist states within globalization, neoliberal globalization, and for competitiveness within neoliberal globalization. That is the case of Ecuador, the government of Korea in Ecuador, or Evo Morales in Bolivia, or the Kirchner phase in Argentina, and maybe also now with Fernandez again in Argentina. But the issue of extractivism has been intended also as an historical model of accumulation leading through the process of uneven development to the dependence on contemporary financialized capitalism. That is to say that this that extractivism, for example, in the analysis of critical agrarian studies, is understood as the main characteristic of global capitalism as a whole. Its essence is linked to financialization and also dematerialization connected to the use of new technology. But for us, and following also Maristella Svampa suggestions, this is actually extractivism is a very positive category, the extraction-based economy. But it's important also to link to see. Maristella Svampa say we believe that the excessive use of this category to denounce certain situations conspires against its descriptive potential and explicatory scope. The extraction-based economy is a useful critical category, but we risk turning it into a kind of demonizing concept, applicable to any situation related to the exploitation of natural goods. This does disqualify other potential agents of transformation. Rigorous use should help us to deactivate current myths and commonplaces related to development, as well as assist us in building bridge to other sectors of society. This is to say, in our perspective also, that it's very important to place the analysis of the extractivism, look into the different situation and look into social and social ecological conflicts in order to understand the different also the different position, different perspective and different proposal around extractivism or alternative to extractivism. And this is the case of Chile and what is happening now in Chile. Christian, you can.
Yeah. we should consider that the issue of extractivist development in Chile is an issue of continuity and change. Chile had a model of development prior to the dictatorship that was actually quite based on the extraction of resources, the mining sector, the agricultural sector, for example. What happened during the dictatorship is an intensification of several of these sectors on the one hand, and also the creation of new sectors as the salmon sector, mainly for export. So we have issues of privatization of resources, of course, but also we have these economic sectors that have been part of the long-term pattern of capitalist development in the country. Water grabbing today is also connected to issues of climate change. We have a long mega water drought in the country, which is now today one of the main political issues in the discussion. And also this tension between discussions concerning environmental resources and increasing production for export, where we see new export commodities, also the free trade agreements that are paving the way for the export of Chilean commodities, not only to the US, but also to the European Union and China, for example. On the other hand, we have poverty in rural areas of agribusiness and forestry development, and increasing conflicts concerning livelihoods in those areas. And in some areas, the particular issues concerning the criminalization of indigenous movements. So connecting to the discussion on extractivism, we really think that analytically speaking, for the case of Chile, we really need to elaborate on the meaning of extraction, but this in the context of the long term of capitalist development in the country. So now, as I mentioned, we had the popular uprising in 2019, and after that an agreement among some political parties that partly ended in referendums to first decide if Chileans wanted a new constitution, and then to show those representatives that we write this new constitution. So today, all right, so we are concluding now. So we have this discussion, and we have here just some issues that are showing how, at the basis of this discussion, we have the extractivist issues of water, for example, and of course different proposals, more radical proposals, some reformist proposals, and also conservative proposals. To end, I think this case leave the question open. So what does it mean to end a neoliberal state, and in more particular terms in the case of Chile? So thank you very much for listening, and we hope we can get some questions and answer them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation, for this inspiring presentation. I'm trying to reshare the video. Yeah, it's working, I hope. So thank you very much for your presentation, and to everyone really for this quite intensive session. And so I'm sorry that it was everything quite packed. But I think everyone has his and her own, appropriate time basically for the presentation. Now we have just unfortunately a few minutes for the discussion, because basically there will be the other session soon. But I think that we can take a few questions. If there are any questions from the audience, I didn't see any comments in the chat. If any of you would like to speak, those of you online, so I will give priority first to the people that are online.
Of course, I thank very much Onofrio for his very kind and careful reading of my paper. I just have a very small comment. My point was not to criticize Bataille, which of course he is much more expert than me. my point here was a kind of criticism of the way Bataille has been used by the growth scholarship to make a case that, in my view, of course I can be wrong, in my view, reinstates a kind of subjectivist understanding of limit. Whereas in the first instance of the growth debates, like the early Latouche, there was an understanding, at least in my view, of limits as material and not self-imposed. So my point is that the second generation of the growth scholars may be coming back to the kind of subjectivist understanding of limits that, in my view, is not helpful to criticize the growth model. So it was not a point about Bataille, but a point about the use of Bataille. Of course, my proposal about the idea of formal life is too complex now to enter into details, but the basic point is that it should be possible to develop an understanding of the individual being in such a way that the limit is acknowledged rather than chosen. So you acknowledge that your own constitution, as the constitution of any other living being, has inbuilt limitation, and this limitation is not just something related to your own choice, but come up at the encounter from your individuality with the other living beings or the environment as such. Of course, Onofrio is quite correct in saying that this micro politics can be not enough to challenge the ruling order. This is a quite diffuse criticism. It comes to my mind, for example, Chantal Mouffe's critique of prefigurative mobilizations. So he's in good company in making this case. On the other hand, we have to bear in mind that historically, very big changes started from a niche. The Christian Revolution, just to mention one, started with a niche. The French Revolution started with niche. So it is not necessarily the case that from micro you cannot shift from macro. It's, in this present condition, it's not so clear on which basis you can build a very big oppositional force, because many attempts have been already carried out with not much success. So I'm convinced that the micro is not sufficient. I'm not totally sure that starting from micro is bound to fail in a sense. So that's just, but I agree with this point in that sense. Okay, I stop here. It was just an attempt of clarification, but thanks very much, Onofrio, for engaging. I hope we will have a possibility to discuss more on these topics.
Thank you very much, Luigi, for this clarification and for this explanation, I would say. Okay, so I'm not sure, we have actually a few minutes left. So Alfredo told me that the next session is starting until 15 past, so 12:15. So we have other, let's say, 9 minutes exactly. So I would take other 2 questions from the audience, or yeah, comments as well. Either from the audience online or to other people here in the audience in the room. I guess everyone is quite tired after this very long session. Okay, so maybe I would have then a question if no one, or actually 2 questions. So one is, staying then with the topic discussed by Onofrio and now by Luigi, how, Onofrio, does your position then differ from the constructivist, we can say, position of Yorgos Kallis on the limits? You gave a very interesting presentation on the on Bataille's position. No? How then? What is then the implication for the so-called issue of construction of limits, and how does it differ then from the book, for example, by Kallis, no limits? I had also two questions to Riccardo and Emanuele, but I think they are no. So I have another question to Mohammed, which is here. So I was wondering, what do you think? What was the role of the UN in such a crisis? So how do you perceive the UN? I was interested reacted to this crisis, no, with the Rohingya people. I think I was always been pronouncing it correctly. What was the role of the UN community, no, of the UN organization in such a crisis? What do you think from your case, from your empirical analysis or from your literature review up to now? So these are quite two different questions. Yeah. So I don't know who would like to answer first. Maybe, yeah. You can, if you want to answer, you can come here. That's
okay. I'm also connected here.
So I will switch it.
So far, the support are going to be inside the camp is basically a joint venture between United Nations and Bangladesh. Especially UNHCR are conducting all this type of supports inside the camp, but Bangladesh just only maintaining the security and other type of things, because legally Rohingya people can go outside from their camp. So this is the role of Bangladeshi government to maintaining the law and order and holding or maintaining the camp, and so that people can't go outside. So here major role is playing by the United Nations and all type of financial supports or other foods and clothes and other materials, but security is maintaining by the government. So it is a joint venture, but all the higher authority is Bangladesh, which I mentioned, RRC, Refugee Relief and Rehabilitation Commission. This is a Bangladeshi agency who is maintaining all these things. At the same time, there is a military too from Bangladesh. At the same time, there is police at the same time. So Bangladesh is the main authority, but all other organizations, NGOs, national, international NGOs are working under the institution of Bangladesh. So no one can enter or go outside without the permission of RRC, and you cannot go into the camp without the permission of CIC, camp in charge. So this is the situation in the camp.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Okay. Yeah, thanks very much for this explanation. And so thanks to all of you for participating to this session. I'm sorry that we didn't have much time for discussion. I enjoyed very much all the presentations. Sorry for the stress, let's say, for the caused by the time limit, so to say. So see you in the next session then, and enjoy a very, very short coffee then. You have 4 minutes for a coffee break. Okay, see you later. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.